So before we get into the meat of this video, we're going to do a quick Yakoba smackdown. It's going to be quick because his arguments have no weight. Those of you who have seen Yakoba's lessons know that he'll have a whole 2 to 3 hour video. 95% of it is historical, geographical, archaeological articles and documentaries intertwined with his own opinions and beliefs. And the remaining 5%, I think I'm being nice, it's actually less, but the remaining 5% will be scripture, which he takes out of context. He rarely ever reads a full thought, nor does he go precept upon precept to confirm what he's saying is true. And many of his weightless arguments that we're going to go over today were actually in the comment section in part 1. They're still there for you all to see. Before we get into that, I want us to go over a couple of words that you're going to hear constantly throughout this video. I'm going to give you the Hebrew translation. Perhaps I recommend you writing it down if you can, or try your best to remember them. So the first Hebrew word is called yam. And the word yam in Hebrew means sea. The next word is nahar. The word nahar means river. Our third Hebrew word is ye'or. The word ye'or in Hebrew means the Nile River. It is only used pertaining to the Nile River, no other river. Nachal. Nachal means a stream or a wadi. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a wadi is, it's actually an Arabic word, but a wadi is a seasonal stream. They typically are inside of deserts, and during the rain season, you'll see more water flowing through it. And in the hotter months, like in the summer, there's little to no water flowing down these streams. So just for review, again, the word yam is sea, nahar, river, ye'or, Nile river, nachal, a stream or a wadi. So let's read Exodus chapter 14. It says, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The children of Israel went into the middle of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So if we look at the Hebrew, I highlighted it in yellow. It says Moses stretched out his hand over the yam. The word ha is used as the definite article the. It's always going to be attached to the word because it functions as a prefix in Hebrew. So that ha means the, and then yam is sea. So over the sea, hayam. It does not say hanachal or ha ye'or. If you continue down, it says a strong east wind all night and made again et hayam, the sea. It does not use the word ye'or. Yahweh called the dry land and the waters seas, and Yahweh saw that it was good. So this is in Genesis during the story of creation, and it's talking about Yahweh again dividing the land between the waters. And we know those waters are obviously the seas and the oceans. And if you look, it says the word yamim. So the word yamim is plural of yam. That yod mem, the last two letters, is what makes the word pluralized. So this is yam. We know that he cannot be talking about a river because rivers are on dry land. And rivers is not what separates the land between the waters. Let's look at another example. All these latter kings joined in the valley of Siddim. This is the Hebrew word for Sodom, the Dead Sea Valley. So it says in the Hebrew, Hu Yam Hamelach, that is the salt sea. Yam, again, the sea, Hamelach. And the Dead Sea is not a river. It uses again the word Yam. Let's now look at the word Ye'or, which is in reference to the Nile. It says, Then Pharaoh's daughter went down into the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking alongside the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. So it uses the word again, lirchotz, to bathe, al hayaor, at the Nile. Ha, again, that is our word the, and ye'or, the Nile. We know through history and through archaeology that the people lived along the banks of the river, and most people would rather, of course, bathe in fresh water, a river, rather than in a salty sea. So this is again in reference to the Nile. And I'm showing you again that the word Nile has its own actual name. I'll show you another example. It says, that is what Yahweh says. By this will you know that I am Yahweh with the staff that is in my hand. And I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed into blood. So again, this is the same exact river that Moses turned into blood, and it calls it the Ye'or. It does not use the generic term for river, which is Nachal, nor does it call it the Yam Suf, or just Yam. It will always, always, always be referred to as the Ye'or and nothing else, because this particular river has its own name.
Erase from your mind any idea of the Red Sea that you know today. Add to your thought processes that the Israelites crossed the Nile River. Now, some of this stuff makes sense once you understand that it was the Nile River that they crossed and not the Red Sea. Go back, for all of you people who don't watch the old videos, go watch the old videos and see that it is the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, right? And do your research and see that reeds don't grow in salt water. They grow in fresh water, which thereby means it was the Nile River.
The crossing of the Red Sea. We're told that God parted the waters. These guys could go through. So if your narrative says they were not going northeast or towards the east from Egypt, they were actually coming down through the Sahara, which makes sense, the desert, right? The big desert they had to cross, and down the valleys, whether it's the Congo or whether they're traveling by the edge of the east coast. Where is this parting of the waters if they are going down Africa? Are they crossing the Nile River? Are they crossing the Limpopo? Are they crossing the Congo?
Easy. In the English Bible, we see the word Red Sea. When you go into the Hebrew, you're going to see the word Yam Suf.
Okay.
Yam Suf means, or Yam can mean a large river, a lake, or an ocean, and Suf means reeds or papyrus. Together, it could be the large or great river of reeds, or the great lake of reeds, or the great sea of reeds. Now, where do reeds grow? Papyrus reeds grow along freshwater river banks.
Right.
Papyrus reeds do not grow in salt water.
Yeah. So the Red Sea would be salt
The
water,
Red Sea
right?
is extremely saline, extremely salty, and is very hot. So if you look at the banks of the Red Sea, you can just Google Red Sea coastline. You will not see any reeds.
Dry.
So when Moses was in a papyrus reed basket, I mean, even in Africa today, they can weave a basket made out of papyrus reeds. We have to understand that the Israelites, they crossed the Nile River.
So Dalton just said that the word Yam in Hebrew means both river and sea. Number one, that's not true. And I've got it here on the screen so that you can see it. That would also be confusion for the word sea and river to be the same. They're not even synonyms. Maybe sea and ocean, river and stream, but not sea and river. Those are two different things. I've also yet to hear Yakoba explain where the Nile River is if it's the Red Sea. What river did Moses turn into blood? What river did baby Moses flow down into the basket? So they both say that the Nile River has to be the Red Sea because this is the only body of water that has reeds, and that reeds only grow in fresh water. So firstly, let's look at what reeds are. Reeds are tall, slender, leaved plants of the grass family, which grows in water or on marshy ground. Many of them grow in fresh water, yes, but there are also certain types of reeds or aquatic grasses that grow in salt water, and these are called salt marshes. But the thing is, Yah does not care about man's scientific explanations. This is what we call semantics and word battles. The point is, there are aquatic grasses in the sea. I've been to the Red Sea over 10 times in 3 different locations. I've been to the Red Sea in Israel, in Eilat. I've been to the Red Sea in Jordan, in Yakoba, and I've been to the Red Sea in various locations throughout in the Sinai Peninsula. And yes, I saw lots of aquatic grasses in the sea. There are also at different beaches along the Red Sea in Egypt that are called mangroves. And mangroves, these are coastal swamps. You can all look that up in your own time. But there are aquatic grasses along and inside of the Red Sea.
Think of this scenario, family. We've been enslaved in America for 400 years. And God says, I'm going to free you from the Americans. And lo and behold, we're on our way. And we cross over into Mexico. Whatever the name of that river over there. What's the name of that river over in Mexico, family? Y'all know. What's that river? Y'all know more than me. So we cross over into Mexico. And we land in Mexico, the promised land. But remember, we went into the wilderness for a little bit for 40 years over there, like let's say southwest. Yeah, the Rio Grande. Thank you. We cross over the Rio Grande and we end up in the promised land across the street from America. Across the street from America. Let me ask you a question, family. Is that deliverance for you? So they then took these people's silver, took their gold, took their bronze. God plagued the heck out of them just for them Negroes to move across the street. Well, you know, Pharaoh, I know that them Israelites, they didn't cross the Red Sea, and they went over there in Arabia, and Pharaoh, you know where they at, Pharaoh? They right across the street now. Pharaoh, they right. No, really. Well, you told me that our men died chasing them in the Red Sea, but guess what? They're right across the street, Pharaoh. Let's go get our money back. Let's go get our gold back. Let's go get our silver, and definitely let's get our slaves back and kill a few of these folks because they're right across the street, Pharaoh. We left America and we in Mexico. Ooh, bye, little American people. All the ones who persecuted and killed us. Guess where we're at now? We're safe. We're on the other side of the Rio Grande now, Americans. Try to get us now. Let's go get them Negroes. They're right across the street.
So we all know the story of how the Israelites got into Egypt. At least I would hope so. If you're not, it tells us in Genesis that Jacob and his seed went down into Egypt during the time that Joseph was reigning because there was a famine. He left the land of Canaan, specifically in Beersheba, and he went down into Egypt. And our people got comfortable and stayed there. We weren't supposed to get comfortable and stay there forever. It was just supposed to be during the time where there was a famine. Yakoba, again, he says that they were all only in the backyard. I personally consider that Yahweh's mercy that our forefathers were only in the backyard. Our forefathers went into slavery several times during the time of the kings, Nehemiah, Ezra, Jeremiah, etc. And they were all in the quote-unquote backyard. That was Yahweh's mercy and his hope that we would return to his covenant. Our forefathers had Jerusalem within arm's reach. If they would just return back to Yah, they could return home anytime. The more and more we continue to sin, we ended up further and further away. And here we are on a whole nother continent, halfway across the world. He also says that the Egyptians could have just came after them because Israel was so close. No, they wouldn't have. Do you all not know the testimony of our forefathers? All of the surrounding nations at that time feared the Israelites because they heard the testimony of the power of Yahweh, how he had plagued the whole land of Egypt, how he had split the Red Sea. So the Egyptians knew that if they were going to go after them, they was going to get the wrath of Yah. Okay, well, why did it take 40 years? So to be honest, it wouldn't have taken 40 years to walk to Ethiopia either. No more than a few months. The point is still invalid. It took our forefathers 40 years to get to the promised land because of our own rebellion and our lack of faith. Yahweh waited 40 years for the older generation of the people to die off in the wilderness because they were the most hard-headed. That point was again later made clear when Joshua told the Israelites that anyone over the age of 20 could not enter into the promised land. Why? Because the youth had a mindset that could still be molded in purity and in righteousness. This was to eliminate the amount of rebels entering into the land. That's why it took 40 years.
Dahomey, a section of the slave coast. Where's Dahomey, y'all? West Africa. Can we say West Africa, boys and girls? Between Little Popo and Porto Novo. So we know the area we're talking about is West Africa, Dahomey. It is now a Portuguese protectorate though the king is still absolute monarch. The chief city, Weta, we talked about Weta, Judah, right? That's all it is. The chief city, Weta, Glenway, Feda, Havita, Uda, was formerly called Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews. So we got Jews in this area. Now, why is Jews in this area? Because it's part of the land that was given to them and their ancestors. How do you know that, Yakoba? While the river Alala, Ephra, there's a river in Dahomey called Alala, which was called Ephra, was spoken of as the Euphrates. Now, there's other documents that say that the Alala River was known by scientists as the Euphrates. So according to this and some other documentation, Alala River, which is located in Dahomey, which is in West Africa, was called Euphrates. Now, if we go back to the promised land, on that day, Yahuwah made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt, which is the Nile River, to the great river Euphrates. Now that we see that one of the places called Euphrates was in Dahomey. From the Nile River to the great river Euphrates. Can we say West Africa all the way to East Africa? Come on now. I'm just saying. You know what's inclusive in that area? Can we say Ethiopia? So there were Jews from the Nile River to the great river Euphrates. Can we say West Africa all the way to East Africa? Come on now. I'm just saying. There were Jews in Dahomey.
So our ancestors, before they ended up in the Americas, our people were scattered and they settled throughout Africa. It is not a far concept that areas or cities where Israelites or Jews dwelt would have given the cities Hebrew names. It doesn't mean that it's the original location as we discussed in part 2.
According to the Bible, there were 4 rivers that came out, right? 4 rivers that came out of the Garden of Eden to do what? To water the whole land, right? Come on, that's Bible. 4 rivers came out to water the whole land. And one of those rivers was what they call the Euphrates River. But remember, they came from one river and they split off, right? Y'all remember that, right? They came from one river and they split off. And one of the rivers was called Gihon. And the name of the second river is Gihon, the same as it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. Now, remember, I told you back then, Ethiopia was really that interior and superior area. And some people consider even all of Africa Ethiopia. But it watered the whole land of Ethiopia. So most of this stuff happened, as I stated, in East Africa. So it waters East Africa, right? Which is all of these rivers and the Niles. It fits perfectly, everything. But yet, using common sense, if they all branched off from a single source, how in the heck is the river Euphrates that they tell us is the river Euphrates today, the true river Euphrates, when they broke off and are fed from the same source, and Gihon is in Africa, or Gihon is in Ethiopia? You tell me, common sense, but I know common sense ain't common. You tell me, common sense, how in the heck the Euphrates River that they tell us is the Euphrates River, but they all supposedly being fed from a single source? I ain't stupid, and no matter how much you tell me I'm wrong, I'm gonna say you wrong.
So if you continue to watch the video, he does say that this Ephra River in the Dahomey region is the present-day Niger River, which he says is the biblical Euphrates. He just admitted to the 4 rivers all being connected and having a meeting point in Eden, which he claims to be in Ethiopia. He also says that the Gihon, which again, according to Torah, says it flows through the whole land of Cush. I expressed where the land of Cush is in part 2, that it's actually not in Northeast Africa. But he just told us earlier that the Nile River is the Red Sea. So it can't be both the Red Sea and then now it be the Gihon River. It doesn't add up. He also says in his Havilah video that the Pishon River is the Volta River system. The Volta River also does not connect to the Nile River. And the Niger River, it doesn't water the Garden of Eden in Ethiopia.
It extends from present-day Turkey. Well, what was Turkey known in ancient days, family? Well, you know, Yakoba, Turkey was part of the land given to Israel. That was part of our land, Yakoba. Don't you know that? Yes, we own Turkey as well. We owned Iraq as well. Well, what was it called in biblical days? Guess what Turkey was, y'all? Do you know what Turkey used to be called, boys and girls? Hittites. The land of the Hittites. So the land that was given to Israel, demarcated by these rivers that came from the same source, that the Gihon and the Euphrates came from, which is in Africa, some kind of way ends up way over here in Hittite land.
So he actually just proved Torah's point. Hittites, according to Genesis 10 and 15, are descendants of Canaanites. Jubilees tells us that Canaan and his sons stole Shem's land, and which we can see the result of that in the Bible. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, all of them dwelt in Shem's land. Can he prove that all of these various Canaanite tribes were in East Africa? Through scriptures, through maps, through archaeology and history, because you can prove all of that in the East. This goes in line with his other point, him saying that present-day Israel cannot be the promised land because there's a bunch of white people over there. Genesis tells us that Japheth would dwell in the tents of Shem. Unlike the Middle East, Japheth has not taken over Africa like they have, to the point where the identity has been lost. They have not completely taken over the house.
So here we have sinner, because some things we can't fully prove because there was a conspiracy, Psalm 83. Names were changed, people were changed, locations were changed. Now, here's the thing. If you believe we the true Hebrew Israelites of the Bible, somebody took somebody's identity. Yes or no? Give me a yes if that's true, or no or no. And if they stole somebody's identity, do you not think that they also stole the land or created a fake land? You got a fake people, a fake land, and a fake Messiah. If you don't think that they hid the true location of Jerusalem, then you don't believe Psalm 83. Psalm 83 says they came together and conspired, what? To move us where? Far away from our land. There's more historical evidence for the quote-unquote black Jews being here in Namibia and Abyssinia area than there is for them being in the Middle East. Now, see why. So here's Genesis 10, 9 and 10. He was a mighty hunter before Yahuwah, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahuwah, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. In the land of Shinar. Now, Shinar is Sinar. 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 It's not Shinar, it's Sinar. Now, does it make sense with the transliterations that Sinar that I showed you on the map in Ethiopia could possibly be the same as Shinar? Sinar. We know we're dealing with transliteration. Sinar. Sinar. S-E-N-N-A-R or S-I-N-A-R, or as they proclaim, Shinar.
So again, notice how he was playing with the words, nor can he read. The letter is Shin, not Sin. It is Shinal. Down below it says that Shinal is actually a country between two rivers. This is the exact description of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. If you look at a map of ancient Shinar in Babylon or Iraq, it sat between two rivers, which was between the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is what we learned about in part 2.
So I'm about to show you a map. So this is a map of East Africa. What do you see right here, fam? What do you see here in East Africa? Where is Babylon? East Africa. Here's Egypt. Here's Babylon. I'm going somewhere with it. So we got Babylon over here in East Africa. Shinar, Sinar. Shinar is what? The beginning of the kingdom of Babel.
So you see these streams right here. This is the Nile River Delta. It looks like a menorah, and it's sitting on the top right corner of the map. This is where the Nile seeps into the Mediterranean Sea as it flows south to north. The landmark where it says Babylon, it's sitting at the tip of the Nile River Delta. This location is called the Fortress of Babylon. It was built in circa 300 AD. Again, circa 300 AD. That's after the time of Yehoshua. The time of the Babylonians was long before Yehoshua came here on earth. So this building was built by the Romans, not the Babylonians, and it still exists till this very day. This is a fortress. It's not a city.
And again, we've already gone over the importance too of Shinar and why that's so important, because if we know the location of Shinar, then we know the location of Babylon also. Again, we've also gone over and told you about the linguistic significance of all of this, how Shinar in the Greek is Sinar, and it's spelled like this, and we told you why that's so important. And once again, we'll show you just for reference, just so that you're able to see that Shinar right here in the Septuagint or in the Greek, Sinar is spelled like this, Sennaar. Is there a Shinar region in Africa near Scripture? Yes, we do. The exact same spelling of Shinar or Sinar in the Septuagint in the Greek. We see that where? In present-day Sudan, around the exact same region as we saw Babylon depicted in the maps from the 1500s. In the exact same region along the Nile River, we have a scriptural match right here. And this map comes all the way from 1806, well over 200 years ago. And notice how it's on this map twice.
So fun fact, you all, Sennaar, Sudan, was founded only in 1504. Again, in 1504 by Amaradunkis, and he was one of the sultanates of Sudan at that time. Sennaar, Sudan, is not an ancient city. That was founded only 500 years ago. Just something to point out, all the maps that Yakoba is showing and Truth Unveiled, they were all written after the 1530s, after Sennaar was founded. That's the end of the argument. So the last weak argument I want to brush over is that there is no water, no mountains, no rivers, no animals, no nothing in the Middle East. I'm not going to waste my time going over this as it's such a silly argument, especially now that we live in a day, 2024, where you can literally go on Google, go on YouTube and look up pictures and videos, and you'll see waterfalls, mountains, rivers, hills, animals, and all of that. And I know our people have seen it and still choose to believe the lie. And those that haven't and have strictly just relied on the words of these leaders and what they're feeding you, that's your fault for choosing to walk blindedly. So I want to show you all something real quick, just something to consider for those of you who believe that the Nile River is the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, as well as those of you such as Yakoba who believes that the Blue Nile is the Jordan River. So on my map I have here displayed the approximate location of Goshen, which is where the Israelites lived during their time in Egypt. This is the exact location where our forefathers fled from their homes on Passover night. And if you're saying that they crossed the Nile in Egypt's borders, went down through Sudan, and then into Ethiopia, that would mean that they would have had to cross the Nile River twice in order to get over the Jordan, which many of you call the Blue Nile. So something to think about. But we will begin with Moses' last days here on earth, which is Deuteronomy 34. It says, Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, that is opposite Jericho, and Yahweh showed him all the land of Gilead to Dan, and all of Naphtali, and all the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah, to the western sea, and the south, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, and the city of palm trees to Zoar. And Yahweh said to him, This is the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your offspring, and I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there. So these are some key factors that we need to remember. The land of Israel has to have a sea on their western border. Again, it needs to have a sea on their western border. So I'm just showing you all real quick where the land of Moab is. We'll go over this in detail towards the end of the video. The land of Moab sits in present-day Jordan next to the southern end of the Dead Sea. And Moses walks up from Moab all the way to Mount Nebo, which sits directly across the Jordan Valley and Jericho, as well as the Jordan River, which sits inside of the Jordan Valley. Joshua 3, it says, When the people moved from their tents to pass over the Jordan, the priest who bore the ark of the covenant being before the people, when those who bore the ark had come into the Jordan, and the feet of the priest who bore the ark had dipped the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks at the time of harvest. The water from the upstream stopped flowing, and it piled up in a heap a great distance away at the town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. It tells us that the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. So I'm going to show you all a quick map of the flow of the Jordan River. So the Jordan River, it actually starts in a mountain range called the Anti-Lebanon mountain range, and it sits between Lebanon and Syria, one of the most well-known mountains that I'm sure many of us have heard of, in which the Jordan River flows through, is Mount Hermon, and it sits in between present-day Israel and Syria. It flows all the way down through the Sea of Galilee, which is that first lake that you see up north, and then it continues to flow down through the Jordan River Valley, past what we see is the West Bank today, and it flows into the Dead Sea and it stops there. So Yakoba teaches that the Dead Sea is Lake Karun, also known as Lake Assal in present-day Ethiopia.
So remember, they came through Sudan, they came this way, and they crossed the Blue Nile, right? And you have Lake Tana, right? And you have the Blue Nile here, right? And the territory is from Galilee, the Lake Tana, and Jordan River, which is the Blue Nile, to the Salt Sea. And that's the Danakil Depression, in my opinion. All right, so here's the Danakil Depression, right? It's a salt area, it's a salt sea, right? Here's some pictures of it, Salt Sea Depression. So from Chinnereth, which is Galilee, which is the Sea of Galilee, which is Lake Tana, the Blue Nile being the Jordan, over to the Salt Sea, which is the Danakil Depression. This is the Salt Sea. It's not the Dead Sea in the Middle East.
He teaches that this is the Dead Sea or the Arava region. As we read in Joshua chapter 3, the Jordan River must flow into the Dead Sea. So if he's saying that the Blue Nile is the Jordan River, which starts in Lake Tana and it flows south into Egypt, it's not flowing east towards Lake Karun. Also shows you that the Blue Nile cannot be the Jordan River because it's not flowing into Lake Karun, as Joshua chapter 3 describes to us. Next, let's read Numbers chapter 34. It says, "Command the children of Israel and say unto them, When ye come into the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall unto you for an inheritance, even the land of Canaan with the coast thereof. Then your south quarter shall be from Zin along the coast of Edom, and your south border shall be the outmost coast of the Salt Sea, eastward. And your border shall turn from the south to the ascent of Akrabim, and pass on to Zin. And the going forth thereof shall be from south to Kadesh Barnea, and shall go on to Hazar Adar, and pass on to Asmon." So it says again, your south quarter shall be from Zin along the coast of Edom. So notice in parentheses I put the word Negev, or sometimes known as Negeb, Nun Gimel Vet or Bet. The word Negev does not literally mean south. Negev is a particular desert region in the southern part of Israel. He's using the Negev as a geographical landmark for directional use. In Hebrew, the literal word for south is Darom. We see this in use, for example, in Ezekiel chapter 42. This is the chapter when the angel gives Ezekiel the dimensions of the inner and the outer courts. It says, he measured the north side. It was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. He measured the south side, Darom, and it was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. So I highlighted here in the Hebrew that it does not use the word Negev, Nun, Gimel, Vet. It uses the actual cardinal term, Darom. But in Genesis chapter 12, we have an example of Abram. It says, Abram traveled still going on toward the south. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to live as a foreigner there, for the famine was severe in the land. So where it says going towards south is the word Negev. So we know that in Genesis chapter 12, it gives us the journey of Abraham when he travels from Haran all the way down into the land of Canaan. And each time it uses the word Negev, pointing towards the south to this particular direction. So it's telling us where directly south. We have a lot of people saying that Abraham started out in Ethiopia and went south into Egypt. So it can't be south into Egypt because it already gives us a particular landmark, and it uses the landmark called the Negev. There is no Negev anywhere in Africa. So let's go back and read verse 3. It says, your southern side will include some of the desert of Zin along the border of Edom. So I have here on the right side, for those of you who can read Hebrew, it says Negev for the word southern. So it should say something like your southern side in the Negev, or your Negev side will include some of the desert of Zin. The desert of Zin sits between Edom and the Israelites' border line. It says your southern boundary will end in the east from the southern end of the Dead Sea. Let's continue on to verse 4. The border then turns south of Ma'ale Akrabim, passing Zin, and its ends shall be to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it shall extend to Hazar Adar and continue toward Asmon. So I have here a pin drop of Ma'ale Akrabim. Ma'ale Akrabim is south of the Dead Sea, and it sits along the desert of Zin. And its ends shall be to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Let's look at Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea, it is in the southern part of the Negev going towards the Sinai Peninsula. Then it shall extend to Hazar Adar and continue to Asmon. So I have here a map. It shows you Hazar Adar and Asmon. Of course, these are approximate locations, but we can see that these two cities or areas, they sit alongside a river. Verse 5 says, the border shall turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, and it shall end at the sea. So I have here in the Hebrew, you can see, it says Nachla Mitzrayim, and its root is Nachal. Hopefully you all remembered our words such as Nachal, Yam, Yeor, and all of that. So it uses the same word Nachal, which is a brook, or another word for a stream or a wadi, as we spoke about earlier. It says Nachla Mitzrayim. It does not call it the Yeor, which we learned is the Nile, nor does it refer to it as a Nahar, which is a river. It is very specific. It is talking about a stream, a wadi, or a brook. So the brook of Egypt sits within the Sinai Peninsula, and today it is known as Wadi El Arish. Other scriptures that mentions the Nachal Mitzrayim, such as in Isaiah 27:2, it mentions that Yahweh is going to gather his people in the end times, his 144,000, from the river in which he's talking about, the Euphrates, to the brook of Egypt, Nachal Mitzrayim. It does not say the Yeor, the Nile, and it does not say Nahar, which is a river. It says again, Nachal, which is a stream, a brook, or a wadi. 2 Chronicles 7 and 8. This is around the time when Solomon brings up the Ark of Yahweh, and he gathers all of the house of Israel to celebrate. It says again, from Hamath, which is the northern border, and Nachal Mitzrayim, which is the most southern border of Israel. So right here I drew out an outline as to something it would have looked like back then. Our line extends or begins at the southern tip of the Dead Sea. It goes along the desert of Zin, also known as the Arava, and it turns up into Wadi El Arish, or the brook of Egypt, and we will continue on to see where our north, west, and eastern border is. Before we leave this portion of the land of Israel, which is the southern portion of Israel, is a midbar. I want us to talk about what a midbar is. So in Hebrew, the word for midbar is the word for desert specifically. Oftentimes you will see this word translated in English as a wilderness. Now, what is a wilderness? A wilderness, according to the dictionary's definition, it's any type of uninhabited or unlivable place. We oftentimes, when we think of wilderness, at least in America, we think of a forest. But that's not the case in the Bible. The word for wilderness, when you look it up, you're going to get the word midbar, and it translates to desert. Not a jungle, not a savanna, not a forest, but a desert. So I have that shown for you in Google Translate. I have that shown for you in the Strongs. I even typed it up on Google so that you can see the search results that I get from it. Now that we know what a midbar is, that it is a desert, and this is the southern geographical and environmental portion of Israel, I want for us to listen to Ron Dalton.
And the word desolate does not mean an arid, dry, barren, lifeless deserts. Israelites that are freely on YouTube, no banning, monetization, 50,000, 100,000 views every day, every other day when they post. This is what we see. That Israel is supposed to be a desert, a desolate land, a dry land. No. Why is this? Because in the Bible, in our KJV, authorized and translated by the Gentiles, it says, the holy cities are a wilderness. Zion is a wilderness. Jerusalem, a desolation. We automatically think, yep, there it is. Ron, he's crazy. You don't know what he's talking about. Jerusalem is a wilderness, meaning it's the desert. But we don't do our due diligence. We don't use critical thinking and logic. We don't question the Gentiles and their crafty work. The Hebrew Strong's word wilderness is midbar. And midbar means wilderness as in a green pasture, a large tract of land where pasture or livestock are driven, led, or guided to for grazing.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second, Ron. I think to read that one more time.
Yes, sir.
Because this is everything. You know what I'm saying?
This is everything.
Yes, because our minds have been programmed to think wilderness means like, tumbleweed rolling by in dirt. But according to Strong's 4057, midbar, wilderness is what?
Wilderness is a green pasture of large tract of land where livestock are driven, led, or guided to for grazing. So when you look at what does the Greek say in terms of this scripture, Isaiah 64:10? The Greek gives us this, and when you translate it into English, it says, okay, our holy city has become a desert. Zion has become a desert. Jerusalem has been cursed. Wait a minute now. What kind of trickery is this now? What's going on with our Google Translate? Why are they saying that the holy city is a desert, Zion is a desert? Now we're going to believe based on the Google Translate that Mount Zion and Jerusalem is a desert like Jordan or Saudi Arabia. Hold on, because in these Greek letters, there's two words that are identical. And if you look at it closely, you'll see them. They are identical. They have the same E-P-N-U-O. That's what it looks like. And you'll see the word Zion is in here. You can really tell Zion. But anyway, let's look at the Greek word right here. See this word right here? Here it is right here. It's here in the Greek language. E-P, looks like an N, a U, an O, and an S.
Right.
Here it is right here in Greek. The Greek transliteration in English is eremos. Eremos, according to the Greek lexicon in the Greek dictionary, the word that we think means desolate or a desert, it simply means a land that is deserted, a land that is remote, a land that is solitary. It's in solitary, meaning it's uninhabited.
So who spotted the lie? Ron Dalton followers, those of you who saw this video, how many of you in your own time went to go and restudy what your moray taught? So we already learned that a midbar is a desert. This man just fabricated and he perjured information from Strong's Concordance and the lexicon. He deliberately wrote and quoted that Strong's number 4057, midbar, says that it is a green, fat pasture when it says otherwise. But in this case, not only did he fabricate once, but twice. He does the same thing in the Greek translation for the word eremos. Both in the Strong's and the lexicon, it does not state a grassland. We're going to read some of it together, and I'll have screenshots of the Strong's Concordance and the lexicon where you can pause the video and read that for yourself. Best believe this is not the first, second, or third time that Ron Dalton and other leaders have done this, falsifying their citations. This man should be reported legally for misrepresentation and fabrication, and needs to be stoned by all of Israel for straight up just lying through his teeth on Yah's word. Let's read it. Strong's 4057, midbar. Strong's Concordance, it says desert. It is a noun, masculine. Midbar definition can also be mouth. So if we scroll down to the exhaustive concordance, it tells us that it is used as the words for desert, south, speech, and wilderness, from dabar in the sense of driving. A pasture, i.e. an open field, whether cattle are driven. By implication, a desert, also speech, including its organs. Desert, south, speech, and wilderness. So this man just added green fatty pasture. That's not what it says. So I know oftentimes when we think of a pasture, we think of, yes, green, plush, green grass. But a pasture is any type of open field that is used for animals to graze on. So our forefathers were sheep herders. Sheep and goats do not necessarily have to feed off of green grass. As long as there are plants, whether that be shrubs, weeds, or whatever, they will eat it. And as we get toward the end of the video, we're going to talk about the plain of Sharon and the pasture that Yah is going to bring his elect into. And it's all in the plain of the Araba, a desert region.
And the word desolate does not mean an arid, dry, barren, lifeless desert. Israelites that are freely on YouTube, no banning, monetization, 50,000, 100,000 views every day, every other day when they post. You know, this is what we see. That Israel is supposed to be a desert, a desolate land, a dry land. No. Why is this? Because in the Bible, in our KJV, authorized and translated by the Gentiles, it says, the holy cities are a wilderness. Zion is a wilderness. Jerusalem, a desolation. We automatically think, yep, there it is. Ron, he's crazy. You don't know what he's talking about. Jerusalem is a wilderness, meaning it's the desert. But we don't do our due diligence. We don't use critical thinking and logic. We don't question the Gentiles and their crafty work. The Hebrew Strong's word wilderness is midbar. And midbar means wilderness as in a green pasture, a large tract of land where pasture or livestock are driven, led, or guided to for grazing.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second, Ron. I think I have to read that one more time for those back, because this is everything. You know what I'm saying? This is everything. Yes, because our minds have been programmed to think wilderness means like, you know, tumbleweed rolling by in dirt. But according to Strong's 4057, midbar, wilderness is what?
Wilderness is a green pasture, a large tract of land where livestock are driven, led, or guided to for grazing.
So I had to play this one more time just to let that soak in case it didn't the first time. Dalton followers, woe to you if you decide to sweep these receipts under the rug and continue watching him after learning that he is a deceiver and a manipulator of Yah's word. Therefore, he obviously was not sent by Yahweh. But unfortunately, most of you will. Most of you, after watching this video, will go down to the grave knowing this man is a lie and continue to defend and support him to the end. This man literally perjured, falsified, and misrepresented what is written in the scriptures. Are we really going to let this man stupefy us and make us believe that a desert is a green pasture? Do we need to go back to the second grade? He shows us the Greek translation. It says desert, it says dry place, and then he's going to say the translation is causing our minds to believe that a dry place is like Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Well, yeah, duh. Our people are reprobate, we're stupid, and we love lies. Why? To feed the desires of our own hearts. Since the time of Moses to this very day, we hate the idea of having to go to the wilderness, the desert. Our people hate the idea of coming into a region where the majority don't look like us, not realizing that we actually detest the inheritance that was given to us. That is both the physical land and the Torah. Dalton, Yakoba, Shari, Truth Unveiled 7-7, and all alike are Canaanites. I don't need to know their lineage. They, by the Spirit, have chosen who their fathers are. Yah said in the book of Judges that the Canaanites would forever be a thorn by our side, that they and their idols would be a snare to us. They have had a large impact on our people during this awakening and continue to deter the children of Abraham away from their land, which is our inheritance, as well as keeping us from the Torah in totality by bringing in their idols. All this African spirituality mess into this awakening. Now I'm going a bit off tracks, but I think we all get the point. So let's move on. So again, as I've stated several times throughout various videos of mine, it is very important that you are back-checking and studying alongside your leaders, testing and trying their word against the Spirit. Even when doing that, it's also very important to check yourself that you are not reading the scriptures to feed the desires of your own heart. Because a lot of our people who believe and follow this back to Africa doctrine actually see the lie and still choose to believe it because it feeds the desires of their own heart. So let's now move on to our western border, starting with verse 6 and Numbers 34. It says, "As for the western border, you shall have the great sea for a border, and this shall be your western border." So that great sea is the Mediterranean Sea, as this is the largest sea in this region. Verse 7, "And this shall be your northern border. From the great sea you shall mark out your border line to Mount Hor." One of the early times we hear of Mount Hor is in Numbers 24. It says they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. So in this chapter, it tells us that Mount Hor is located or close to the land of Edom. So he's telling us that it is his northern border. So he can't be talking about the land of Edom in this case, as Edom is close to Israel's southeastern border. Many scholars believe that Mount Hor would be talking about the, again, most northern border, which would be located somewhere in Lebanon, and it appears to be close to those anti-Lebanon mountains. It says, "From Mount Hor you shall mark out your border to the entrance of Hamath. Then the direction of the border shall be toward Zedad." 9. "The border shall proceed to Ziphron, and it shall end at Hazar Enan, and this shall be your northern border." So Hamath is located in present-day Lebanon, again close to that anti-Lebanon mountain region where we spoke of the Jordan River beginning at. These are the tribes listed by name. At the northern frontier, Dan will have one portion, and it will follow the Hethlon road to Lebo Hamath, Hazar Enan, and the northern border of Damascus. Next to Hamath will be part of its border from the east side to the west side. All right, so I still have the maps displayed. We're still in Lebanon, and we are also in the southern part of Syria, close to Damascus, all the cities that he has named. This is something as to what the borders would look like from the southern border, the western border, and the northern border. It's not going to take us long to get through it because it's really simple. Yahweh has not hidden these locations to where it's going to be difficult for us to find out where our forefathers were and where he's calling us to return to. So no, it does not involve any deep research to do this. So we'll start again from our southern border. It started south of the Dead Sea. It goes along the plain of the Arava, which is in the wilderness of Zin, on the coast of Edom, as we learned. And it goes up along Wadi El Arish, also known as the Brook of Egypt or the River of Egypt. It travels up north along the whole coastal border of present-day Israel or Palestine. And that whole coastal border sits along the Mediterranean Sea, got just about all of Lebanon and a good chunk of Syria. And I also just want to point out real quick that the outline of this map that we have so far from the southern to the northern border, it matches perfectly the promise that Yahweh gave to Abraham that his seed would dwell between the River of Egypt, which we learn is present-day Wadi El Arish or the Brook of Egypt, and the land continues all the way up until the Euphrates. And the area of Hamath, we can see on the map that it's pretty close to the border of the Euphrates. So to those who are calling Ethiopia the promised land, many people are saying that the Nile River is that great river of Egypt, but Ethiopia should be in between the two rivers, meaning the Nile River and whatever Euphrates River that you want to say it is. Many people are calling the Niger River the Euphrates, but the Euphrates is all the way in West Africa. So again, the promised land needs to sit in between two rivers, the River of Egypt and the Euphrates, and Ethiopia does not fit that. I also want to point out real quick, as we have learned through the Bible, that Israel's western border is surrounded by the coast, the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean. So those of you who are saying that Ethiopia is the promised land, we know that Ethiopia, yes, its borders were much larger than it is today. But Ethiopia does not have a sea on its western border. It's on its eastern border. Okay, and I know, well, someone is going to say, well, the map is upside down. So if you flip it upside down, then yes, the sea is going to be on its western border. But we learned earlier that the eastern border is the Jordan Valley. That's where the Dead Sea sits. The Dead Sea is supposed to be on its western border. This is the exact borderline where the Israelites crossed over from the land of Moab into the Promised Land. So even if we flip the map upside down, the Danakil Depression, or Lake Karun, what some of you refer to as the Dead Sea, is not on the western border. A third thing I want to point out for Israel's western border is the land of the Philistines, also known as Gaza. So TEO Yakoba, in his opinion, as he says, quote unquote, in his opinion, he believes that the land of the Philistines are in present-day Oromo Valley.
So here is the lower Omo Valley. Now, according to them, where the other brooks flow down, right, to the plains, I believe, just my opinion, that Gaza is somewhere right here in the Ethiopian plains by the lower Omo Valley.
So there are several scriptures that gives us, physical description of where the Philistines lived. The Philistines lived next to the sea. The Oromo Valley is inland. So again, this does not fit the description of what Torah tells us about the Promised Land. Numbers 34 verse 10, it says, "You shall mark out your eastern border from Hazar Enan to Shepham. The border shall go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border shall go down and reach to the eastern side of the Sea of Kinneret," also known as the Kinneret or the Sea of Galilee. So 2 Kings 23 tells us that Riblah was in the land of Hamath. So we're still in the same region up north in the southern part of Syria, and perhaps even on the eastern border of Lebanon. So it tells us again that the border is extending up north all the way down to the Sea of Galilee. And I talked a little bit about the Sea of Galilee not too long ago when I spoke of the Jordan River. I mentioned that the Jordan River, it starts in the anti-Lebanon mountains and it extends all the way down south, and it pours into the Sea of Galilee and continues to flow down into the Dead Sea. And as we read in Joshua chapter 3 earlier, this is the same region where our forefathers crossed over from Jordan to the land of Canaan. It was on the eastern border of Israel. So again, Yakoba, he says that Lake Tana is the Sea of Galilee. But the Bible tells us that the Sea of Galilee is on the eastern border of Israel. Lake Tana is in northern Ethiopia. So this does not fit the description, again, of what Torah tells us. Ezekiel 47 verse 18, it says, "On the east side of the boundary will run between Haran and Damascus, along the Jordan between Gilead and the land of Israel, to the Dead Sea and as far as Tamar. This will be the eastern border." So again, it tells us that the eastern boundary is running from Damascus along the Jordan between Gilead and the land of Israel, even to the Dead Sea as far as Tamar. And Tamar is a small town along the Dead Sea region. And we know, according to Numbers 34, it tells us that 2.5 tribes received their inheritance across the Jordan, and that would have been Reuben and Gad. This is what our forefathers' borders looked like, extending all the way from the brook of Egypt until Hamath, close to the Euphrates River, and it fits perfectly the description that Yahweh promised Abraham's seed. So there are leaders such as Yakoba, who teaches that Jerusalem has been lost. There are also many saying that it is not a salvific matter to know exactly where the borders are. In the next segment of this video, we'll be learning where within the borders from between the brook of Egypt and the Euphrates, the remnant, the 144,000 elect, have been commanded to gather. So has Jerusalem really been lost? Jeremiah 17:4 talks about Jerusalem, yes, the physical land, being the inheritance of the people. Throughout the whole Bible, Yahweh tells us that if we obey his words, he will allow us to eat and partake of the good of that land. Yahweh has also commanded us to come out of Babylon. And if we don't, we're going to be destroyed. What good parent, what good shepherd gives a command without instruction and direction? Why would he call the house of Israel to come out of a location and not tell them where to go? Ezekiel 20 tells us that the nation of Israel had the finest land of all lands, which proves to the historical aspect that the region of Mesopotamia, where, yes, Israel is, the region of Canaan has been the most desired and the most fought over land in all of earth, way back from the time of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And I believe many of us are familiar with some of these wars that have taken place between the Romans, the Greeks, the Ottomans, the Arabs, the Persians, the Babylonians, the British. Until this very day, there has been constant war and friction over these borders. Historically, Africa has never been a land that has been desired to possess amongst many nations. So where is the wilderness? Where is the holy mountain that Yehoshua has commanded his bride to be at when he calls, or else? So let's begin with Isaiah 11. It says, "It shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, from Elam and Shinar, from Hamath and the islands of the sea, and will assemble the outcast of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." So this is a prophetical scripture referring to Yahweh returning the remnant to a particular place. He's going to wave his hand again a second time, meaning he already did it. From the four corners of the earth they shall fly down upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. So as I mentioned earlier, the Philistines lived off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, which is Israel's western border. And in the Hebrew, for the word west, Isaiah does not have it written in the proper cardinal term for the word west, which is ma'arav. But what's written is yama. Hopefully you remembered yam, which is the root. This word means sea. So much like what we learned previously, that the Negev was used as a directional term for south, but it's actually not the proper terminology for the word south. It's darom. Each time you see the word yama written in the Bible, it is referencing the Mediterranean Sea, which is west. Next it says, "Together they shall plunder the people of the east." Who is east of the Philistines? That is Edom and Moab, which we read earlier. It sits on the border of the wilderness of Zin. We also covered earlier that the land of Moab, where Mount Nebo is close to the location where our forefathers crossed the Jordan into Canaan. So to be clear, the region in which we crossed from over the Jordan is the same exact region where we are returning to, where the house of Israel is going to plunder. Let's continue. It says, "Yahweh will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt. With his mighty wind he will shake his fist over the river and strike it in 7 streams, and make men cross over dry shod. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people who will be left from Assyria, as it was from Israel, in the day that he came up from the land of Egypt." Isaiah 16, it says, "Let my outcast dwell with you, O Moab. Be a shelter to them from the face of the spoiler. For the extortioner is at hand, and devastation seizes. Send the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah to the wilderness, to the mount of the daughter of Zion." So one of the first times we hear about the land of Selah is in 2 Kings 14. It talks about when Amaziah, he killed 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. And the Valley of Salt is where the Dead Sea is. It says that he also conquered the region of Selah. So there are 2 locations, according to archaeologists, where Selah is. So Selah, known today in Jordan as As-Salah, is located not too far away from the Dead Sea Valley or the Salt Valley. This is a ruined geographical site that was once a Edomite fortified city. There is also another location called Petra. Petra, this is also not too far away from the Dead Sea, and Petra was also a location that was known as Selah. Petra was an ancient Nabatean city, and it sits again in the region of Edom. Send the lamb, we know the lamb is Yehoshua, to the ruler of the land from Selah, which would be the southern portion of Jordan. This is Edom's border, to the wilderness. We know the wilderness is the desert. He's talking about the desert region, to the mount of the daughter of Zion, which is the location in which Yahweh is returning his elect to. We know that the 144,000 is going to redo what our forefathers did not do at Mount Sinai. And even Paul tells us that Mount Sinai is located in Arabia. Let's move on to Isaiah 27:10. It says, "Yet the fortified city will be desolate, the habitation forsaken and left like a wilderness. There the calf will feed, and there it will lie down and consume its branches." So here in Isaiah 27, we can see that he's clearly giving us a description as to what the land looks like before he renews it. He's saying that it's desolate, it's forsaken, it's left like a wilderness, a desert. None of these areas up in Ethiopia, in Congo, Nigeria, Tanzania look like a desolate, forsaken desert area. Ezekiel 25, it says, "Therefore, thus says Yahweh, I will stretch out my hand against Edom, cut off man and beast from it, make it desolate from Teman. Dedan shall fall by the sword." So Teman and Dedan is present day Yemen and Arabia. He is going to clear these lands. He's told us in prophecy he is going to create streams for the remnant to cross from East Africa into Arabia so that they can enter in to a desolate and protected place. And I gave in my Come Out series an example as to how Yah can clear out these lands. And one of the examples I gave was in 2022. Saudi Arabia, there were massive floods throughout the desert, and a large population of Bedouins were forced to leave their homes in the desert and come into the cities. Another example is in Israel today. There are Bedouin communities in the Negev desert, and for years now, they have been forcing the Bedouins to come out and live in the cities, get registered in the system, and that's going to actually happen, as we know, worldwide. But that is another way how these lands are going to get cleared out, that the government is going to start forcing those of the Bedouin populations to now come and live and comply to the beast system.
Plan to forcibly move 36,000 Arab Bedouins out of the southern Negev desert has been criticized by a human rights group. The Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel says the proposal violates both Israeli and international law. Israel insists it will begin the relocations next year to make way for a military development.
So let's now talk about the Araba. So I want you all on your own time to actually look into these words so that you can see for yourself where the Araba is. But if you look into the Hebrew or the Strong's Concordance of the word Araba, it tells you straightforwardly. So it says in the Strong's, the Araba is a steep or a desert plain, also a desert valley running south from the Sea of Galilee. And it is from the same word, Arab. I think we all know where the Arabs live. Deuteronomy 1:1, it says, "These are the words Moses spoke to all Israel in the wilderness east of the Jordan." That is the Araba opposite Suf, or across the Suf. And the Suf is the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea, between Paran, Tofel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. So let's talk about for a moment the Jordan Valley. So the Jordan Valley, it told us in the Strongs that it is a desert valley running south from the Sea of Galilee. So these are some diagrams, and we can see on the first one with the red line, and it shows us that the Jordan Valley, yes, begins at the Sea of Galilee and extends all the way to the Red Sea. Just as the Strong's tells us, the Jordan Valley is also sits on a fault line known as the Rift Valley. And I have on the right side an image of the Rift Valley. The Rift Valley actually begins what looks like could be the anti-Lebanon mountains, and it extends all the way into East Africa. So it tells us that the Araba is across the Suf, or opposite of the Yam Suf, and it is between Paran and Tophel. So let's look at Paran and Tophel. One of the first times we hear of the wilderness of Paran is in Genesis, when it talks about Hagar and her son Ishmael moving from Abraham and Sarah's house, and then she moved to the wilderness of Paran. And the wilderness of Paran sits somewhere in between the border of southern Israel and present-day Sinai Peninsula. And Tophel is a city that sits south of the Dead Sea in the land of Edom. So if you look at our diagram of the Arava, it ends at the Red Sea and it extends all the way up north towards the Dead Sea. And the Arava continues on eastwards into Jordan. So just for visuals, I want you all to have a quick look of what the Araba looks like on Israel's side as well as Jordan's side. So this person is driving along a highway called Highway 90, and Highway 90 is a highway that extends all the way up north from the border of Lebanon and extends all the way down south, and it sits inside the Jordan Valley, or the Rift Valley, and it is the valley that separates present-day Israel and Jordan, and it also goes along the wilderness of Zin, which is along the coast of Edom. So unfortunately you can't really see it so well in this picture, but if you were driving on this highway you can see it clearly. The Araba on Israel's side is more of a tannish brown color, in which you can see here in this video, but on the left side, which is where the Araba is, where Jordan is on their mountains, you can see clearly if you are driving down that highway that their mountain range has a reddish tone. And the word Edom or Edom comes from the word Adom, like red. The land of Edom is red. So if we take a look here, you can see here that the Wadi Araba on Jordan's side is very, very red, just like the Bible describes to us. So something else to keep in mind is having knowledge that the land of Edom, where the wilderness is, where the elect has been called into, that region has a red tint. Isaiah 35, it says, "The wilderness and the wasteland shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose." So I have here written in parentheses the Hebrew translation, starting with wilderness. The actual word is midbar, what we learned earlier. And we learned earlier that a midbar is a literal desert. And the wasteland, tziyah. So the word tziyah is the root of the word tzion, also known as Zion. So the literal meaning of the word tziyah or tzion is a wasteland or a dry place, which gives us again the description of a desert. And the desert, the Araba, shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. He's telling us that this particular desert is the Araba region. Tzion, it is going to be a wasteland and a dry place, and it's also a desert. None of these three descriptions fit Ethiopia or Congo or in wherever else these leaders are saying the promised land is. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice, even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it. So I've never been to Lebanon, but by word of mouth, I have heard that Lebanon is very beautiful. And I have here some images of the nature in Lebanon. He is going to give the Araba region the glory of Lebanon and the excellence of Carmel and Sharon. So Carmel and Sharon are two locations within present-day Israel. Carmel, it is a beautiful mountainous region that sits not too far from the Mediterranean Sea. This is also the valley of Sharon. This is a perfect place, as we can see, for pasturing sheep, very green and beautiful. it says that they shall see the glory of Yahweh and the excellency of our El. So he's showing us here in Isaiah 35 that he is going to rejuvenate this area, cause it to become a green place. How does Ethiopia or all of these other green areas within Africa fit the prophecy that Yahweh is going to do this miracle if it's already a green land? Verse 6, it says, "For waters shall burst forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert, and parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty lands springs of water. And the habitation of jackals, where each lay, there shall be grasses with reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and a road, and it shall be called the highway of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for others. Whoever walks the road, although a fool, shall not go astray." So Yahweh has made his commandment clear and simple. I didn't need to go into a bunch of research articles, historical documents, and other resources alike to prove and to show Yahweh's word, because he has not hidden Jerusalem, but we simply have chosen to forget it. Again, this back to Africa doctrine is new. This has never been an argument and has only been spread for the sake of, again, black pride and black unity. One of the last things I want to address is woe to these leaders who continue to spread evil report regarding the present day state of Israel. Several mores, advocates, and leaders such as African Exodus, one of many, who creates videos regarding the negative political side of the state of Israel. I can very well do the same thing and pull up all the wickedness of what's going on in Ethiopia's society. Yes, it is very important that we all know the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on in these borders, but we don't use this knowledge as a sword to fearmonger and to spread evil report to deter people from obeying the word of Yahweh, which is to come out and to return to the region of the Arabah and to return to the borders that he gave to Abraham between the river of Egypt and the Euphrates. This is the same thing that the spies who went to Canaan and caused people to doubt in their mind going into Canaan's land as Yahweh commanded. So I'm going to end it off here. I hope this video was either edifying, that it brought more knowledge to your lack of understanding, or even confirmed as a second or third witness to what you may have already known regarding Yahweh's commandment of coming out. This lesson is not for everyone to receive, so let the children of Ham return to their land, and let the children of Shem return to their own. For each his own to decide. Shalom.